Hey Gearheads, and welcome to GT Garage Talk, a discussion about all things automotive. I am your host, Cory, and on this week's episode, we are talking motorsport, high-speed performance driving, and I have a professional driver with me, joining me on this week's episode. I actually met her at an event put on by Texas Motor Speedway, or Texas Auto Riders at Texas Motor Speedway, get that right. You can see her in one of our videos. She is riding shotgun, instructing us as we are taking the Dodge Charger SRT 392 Scat Pack Wide Body Hemi Orange, I think I got that all right, around the track at the event. Her name is Sabré Cook. She is a professional racer. She's been doing this practically her entire life. She is also a engineer by trade and by education. She does it all. She's very involved in all of motorsport. It was awesome to get to have her instruction out on the track. It was awesome to get to have a conversation with her here on the podcast. So without further ado, I will bring on Sabré. It's been a couple weeks since you and I met, but thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
So as I said in my intro, I met you at the Texas Auto Riders event. It was a track-focused event, and you had the privilege of being the instructor that Dodge brought along in their awesome Dodge Charger SRT 392 Hemi Orange. I'm trying to remember all the right language and terms for that vehicle, but looks like you had a fairly good time out there, did you not?
Yes. It's always fun when Dodge brings us out because, I mean, they've definitely got the horsepower to make anybody's day a very happy one.
Yes. And then you made everybody smile, you and your partner out there, Moses Smith, because y'all concluded the event with a farewell send-off to the rear tires of both that and the Challenger Superstock that was out there, and just sent them in a big cloud of smoke to end the event. So just incredibly grateful to have you out there.
Yeah, that's always the fun thing is you get permission from Kimberly and you're like, can we do it now? And then they finally let us go do the burnouts at the end. So.
Yeah, I wish I had counted all the cameras that were on y'all at that point in time. You were at a slight, 300 plus horsepower disadvantage to Moses and his Challenger Superstock over there, but still a fun way to end 2 days of, I'm doing air quotes here, hard work, right?
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about that event and really more about you in this episode. I went to your website, sabercookracing.com, and you have done a lot, like a whole lot in the racing world and in the automotive world. And
well, I do actually apologize. My racing website is not up to date. So I'm actually in the process of having it redone.
Okay.
So it is a couple years probably outdated, but it is awesome that you still visited the site.
Yeah, well, the last 2 years don't count, right? Like, they've all been a blur. I'll give you a pass, absolutely, as will all of our listeners to this episode, I'm quite sure. So, yes, even those 2 years notwithstanding, you've got a long list of accomplishments. But first, I want to dig into a little bit of what got you involved and when you got involved in the automotive world.
So I was lucky to have a family that was involved in motorsports. My dad used to race motocross and supercross professionally back in the 80s, and he and my mother didn't want my brother and I racing motorcycles. So we got into karting. I drove my own kart for the first time right before I was 8 years old. So that's kind of how the initial introduction came about.
Start 'em young, as the phrase always goes, right? And from that point, I know you've been involved competitively as well as you were brought out as an instructor to this event. So you've kind of done both sides of it, correct?
Yeah, so I am a professional driver. I do professional, personal, private, or group coaching, and then I am also an engineer, so I do that as well.
My goodness. So, all right, we'll get into that. The professional side. When did you professionally start racing, and in what?
I guess like when I officially, well, I won my first karting world championship when I was 13, but I guess I would say like obtained sponsorship like and like more consistently like was like sponsor driver. I was probably that probably started at 14, 15,
Okay.
and then got my official shifter cart like pro license when I was 17, I believe. And then but I didn't actually make the transition to cars until 2017 when I was almost 23 years old.
Wow. Okay.
So I had a little bit of an issue, like, well, like everybody does, right? Car racing is very expensive, and
Right.
finding the amount of sponsorship that I needed was very difficult. So finally was able to make my debut in 2017. But yeah, so it took a little bit, and then I started racing on a pro license the next year in 2018.
Okay. So you started like professionally racing with sponsors, with like money back behind you before you were even legal to drive a car on the road, which is impressive. I understand, karting's a little bit different, but still, like competitively racing. What was that like when it came to like transitioning and getting your license and coming of age, so to speak?
Um, Honestly, I at first I feel like I didn't like yeah, once I could finally get my permit and drive on the street, I was like, "Okay, yeah, this is fine." But then I kind of like wasn't super excited about it because it's a little more slow, right? And like so I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll get my hours done like when when you have your permit before you
Right.
have to drive." And then I think I left it all to like the very last minute and cuz at the time, I had my go-kart. So
Right.
like I'm like, "Oh, I'm just going to go I'd rather go drive that." So yeah, that was funny that it is a little comical thinking that they had to push me to get the correct amount of hours done for my
Who
license.
wants to sit in traffic, right?
But yeah, I mean, I passed my test the first time when I just before I turned 16 and got my license with no issues. I do have and have well, I have had some speeding tickets, which I feel like that's not surprising.
It's par for the course.
But I feel like I've calmed down a little more, like road driving wise, like over the last several years, just because I'm like, okay, this isn't a racetrack. Like I could be more patient. But yeah, I also have a mom car that prevents me from getting into trouble. So I wouldn't like to. I would not be. I think as blessed with the lack of speeding tickets if I had something like that, the Charger with
Right.
or the Super Stock. That would be a different story.
There are some cars immediately after firing them up, yeah, this one's going to be expensive for multiple reasons and it will get me
Mhm.
in a lot of trouble. Yeah, I know the feeling for sure. So, what was your first vehicle?
My first vehicle, well, when I first turned 16, I didn't have like my own car. I would like borrow my parents' cars at first, like if I needed to go somewhere. But my own like first car was a Chevy Equinox.
Okay.
So nothing
Yeah.
spectacular at all, which is good,
Yep. Yep.
kept me calm. I did end up saving up and buying a spec Miata. Like it's not street legal, obviously, but several years later, a while later, and then now I have a Rav4. So
Okay.
it's great for hauling a lot of things, all the like all my moving around the country and going through the snow and the ice. Like it's great for that. But yes, it is not fast at all.
It removes that temptation to needlessly spend your money funding law enforcement departments across the country, right?
Yes,
It's
exactly.
all in reframing exactly how you look at it. Well, that's awesome. What was that first speeding ticket behind the wheel of?
I think it was my Chevy Equinox. Like
Okay.
it was, yeah. And was it? Yeah, yeah, it was. When I was, I think I was, oh gosh, I think I was maybe 18 or 19.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I believe my first official speeding ticket was in my Camaro SS, but then I laugh because I replaced that one with an absolute. I'll explain it this way. A general manager of a local dealership that I partner with says, "Is that your car?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "What is a car reviewer doing driving the most vanilla of all cars?" And it's a 2013 Chevy Cruze Eco. And I told him, I was like, it gets over 40 miles per gallon and it has a manual transmission, which nobody believes me when I say it has a manual. And I had to keep
Yeah,
just a,
that is rare now.
yes, I had to keep a little bit of fun saying goodbye to, 400 plus horsepower in my Camaro. So that little bit of fun came in the form of 3 pedals and 6 gears. So, but I did get a speeding ticket in that, which is ridiculous. It's a little 1.4 liter four banger. It's nothing, but sometimes.
Still, you can get in trouble in all kinds of things.
Yes,
So
yes, absolutely. All right. Shifting a little from the personal side of things, the professional side of things, you said it was 2017 when you really shifted into professional car racing, which, again, last 2 years kind of blur together. Does not seem like it was that long ago. What has that been like for you?
So my very first race was in a spec racer Ford
Okay.
at in York, or not in York, Pennsylvania. In it was in Pitt. Oh my gosh, I can't even remember the name of the track right now. Summit Point, that's what
Okay.
it is. Summit Point in Pennsylvania, and yeah, so I raced just amateurly in SCCA that first year in 2017, and then I moved and did a couple USF 2000 races, a couple USF4 races in the latter part of 2018. And then I ended up winning an engineering competition that also secured me a job. So I moved to the UK in 2019. And at the same time, I also qualified as one of the first women to compete in W Series in 2019. So I raced W Series in 2019. I did a minor amateur endurance race at the end of 2018, I guess, leading up to that. And then in 2020, everything was a bit weird,
Right.
but I did more like SCCA stuff. But then I also did Indy Pro 2000, where I did 2 races in that, and then coached a lot. And then in 2021 went back to W Series, but also raced the MX5 Cup race at Daytona, raced a 997 Cup car, a 991 Cup car in the Porsche Sprint Challenge, raced an M2 at the Nürburgring in the NLS race, and raced a TCR car for Brian Herta in the COTA WRL race. So I got to do a lot of different things last year.
My goodness.
But unfortunately, I was also injured last season. And so I had hip surgery 10 weeks ago now. And so I am not allowed to race again until September. So
Oh,
that's been my 5-ish years of race car driving.
well, in those 5 years and in the past, what minute, you rattled off many like bucket list items for me. So kudos and congratulations to a very impressive resume. But I have to ask, what's Nurburgring like?
It is unlike anything else. It honestly, the first time you go out, you were like, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself. Like you literally think that
Right.
you just you're like, I'm going to die. But then you go out and you do it. Like once you come back the second time, you're like, this is fine.
Right.
This is fine. I could do this. But yeah, if any driver goes out the first time on Nürburgring and tells you that they don't scare out of themselves, just a little bit, they're lying.
Right. Right.
That's just the nature of the track, and it is awesome. Like, and it's such an eye opener. After you race on Nürburgring, you're like, everything else just seems very safe.
Right.
And you're just like, why does like you just feel so much more comfortable like pushing the limits on like a normal street circuit or a road course
Right.
after you've done the Nordschleife.
So it's like scaling Everest or something along those lines. It's like I've done it all now, so in perspective, right?
Yeah, I would guess so. It just opens your eyes to a a different a new level of a way a racetrack can be, I
Right.
guess. And it makes me even more respect like I think the guys that used to race, back in the day, like in the 60s and 70s, like what they were racing around in at those speeds, like it
Mm-hmm.
blows your mind today looking at them and you're like, oh my gosh, these guys were absolutely crazy. So then thinking about how they were running on those kinds of tracks in those kinds of cars that long ago, it just blows your mind even more. And you're just like, think those guys are just absolute heroes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what would you say has been perhaps your favorite track? I know that the Nurburgring kind of holds a special place in everybody's mind, but maybe that one not so much. I don't know.
I think it's awesome, but I would say my favorite racetracks would probably be uh internationally. I mean, I love Spa and I love
Okay.
Brands Hatch GP. As far as like US tracks, I mean Laguna Seca is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Watkin Glen one time, and that was awesome. But I also really enjoy Mid Ohio. Like I
Okay.
know not a lot of people love it, but I don't know. I like it's just like it's shorter. There's a lot going on. Like it can be more physical because there's not a lot of breaks. So yeah, I enjoy that track too.
So I know you're rattling off a bunch of racetracks I am familiar with only because like I'm a big Need for Speed guy, and I've raced quote unquote raced them all digitally and virtually, I should say. Is there anything that you do to prepare for certain tracks or certain events?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before every event, aside from like the actual physical training that you're doing, if you can do test days, obviously that's super important. Anytime you can get seat time is great. But for preparing for a specific track, I'll go and like basically research, right? Like you research the track, you research like the distance, the elevation, what relative lap times are there. You watch onboard videos of cars that are the same as yours or similar enough to where you can get a gauge of how the track flows, how it will feel, get like maybe some pickup like solid reference points for when you actually get to the track. I'll make a track map that has pre-event notes on it. If you're with a great team, they'll also provide you with some pre-event notes, and I'll definitely drive it on a simulator
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible, and do some visualization before I even get to the track, just so that way I know exactly like what I need to do and what I need to be focusing on first session instead of like learning the track the first session,
Right.
right? Like doing all preloading all of that work so that way I can be moving on to the next thing.
Yeah. Do you ever get a feeling when you arrive to a track for the first time, like you've done all that work, especially like on a simulator? Does it feel bigger, smaller, or surreal seeing it in front of you?
I wouldn't say surreal. I think drivers are more cynical. We're just like, this doesn't look like the sim, or this isn't accurate. So I think that's more what we're looking at. It's not so much of the only surreal moment I would say that I had where I was just like, wow, I'm here at this moment was probably the first time I went to drive on Indianapolis Motor Speedway
Okay.
on the GP circuit. That that is something that I remember being like, wow, this is awesome. As well as like, I guess when I came out for the Coda race, like I've been on Coda before, but when we had our home race last year with with the F1 GP and just driving out on track for the first time, that was more of a surreal moment. But yeah, I'd already been there. So, but yeah, I would definitely say Indianapolis.
Yeah. You bring up Coda. I was supposed to have had some seat time, some wheel time in a C8 Corvette, not at speed. I was going to be in a parade lap around the nation's only permanent F1 track. And unfortunately, some yahoos ahead of us broke the rules and
Oh no.
thought they were doing a hot lap, apparently, and did some structural damage and some Corvette damage of their own. So the track was shut down for future parade laps, and I got to drive in the parking lot of Coda. So,
Aw.
uh,
Well, I'm sure you will have more opportunities in
yes,
the future.
yes. My wife was there with me, and she actually got to see the actual track. I was so bitter at the moment. I went in my first experience seeing the track, being on the track. So
Yeah.
I left without even seeing the track for myself. I was like, nope,
Aw.
nope. I was supposed to be on it. This didn't work. So, yes, hopefully things will work out again someday in the future. But man, I am extremely jealous. I'll say that right now because you just keep listing off cool track after cool track. And
Well, you will have plenty of chances to go drive them, I'm
yes,
sure.
yes. You brushed over something earlier that I don't want to let get away from me, and that is you are a mechanical engineer as well, correct?
Yes.
So that at one point was in my career path. Like that was something I was thinking about doing and pursuing. You've actually gone through that, have your bachelor's degree. Where from? What's that like? How do you apply that to what you're doing now?
So I went to the Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado. It's the right now. I think it's still ranked the number one public engineering university in the U.S.
Okay.
So I had amazing professors. Just it was a great environment, and plus it was in Colorado, so I loved that I could stay in my home state. And then I graduated the end of 2017, and then I won the Infinity Engineering Academy at the end of 2018. And so, with my mechanical degree, I worked in vehicle testing at Infinity Global, which also Nissan. And then I worked for, which is a little bit different than a mechanical engineer would normally do, but I did work in suspension composite design for Renault F1.
Interesting.
So that one was, yeah, it was different because I hadn't really embraced the whole composites area of engineering yet. So I got to learn a lot from that. And then I did have a grad position that was offered to me to stay, but then I was like, oh, I'm gonna go race, full time in W Series again next year being 2020.
Right.
So I decided to move back to the US, and then COVID said, "Jokes on you," and 2020 was whatever it was. But in the interim, I also worked as a final design and integration engineer for the Mazda. I did a little bit of like consulting with Cranfield Simulation, and then this year, last year I also did more for Formula Mazda, and then this year I'm actually going to be doing some race engineering and performance engineer work, one for a Porsche Cup team and the performance engineer work for an IndyCar team starting next month. So I'm just, jumping around,
Yeah.
gaining all of the experience that I can, trying to learn from some really amazing people and some of the best people in the industry. So I've been, yeah, super fortunate so far and just excited to keep learning.
That, that's amazing stuff. Would you say your experience behind the wheel since 8 years old plays a huge factor in how many of your counterparts have that same kind of background?
I think definitely my driving and motorsports experience from a young age helps me immensely as an engineer. I A lot of people want to say, "Oh, you're an engineer. It must help you so much as a driver." And like I want to say yes, but in truth it's not
Right.
it's not the case. If anything, it actually sometimes makes you think too much. And when you're driving, you need to be very much like in your subconscious. You need to
Mhm.
be reacting, not thinking actively through things. So that is something that I need to balance in the right way. But it does help me communicate well with my engineers.
Yeah.
So I would say, as an engineer, beneficial to be a driver. As a driver, being an engineer,
Not so
it's a
much.
toss-up.
Yeah, that would be my next question, because I tend to overthink things as well. And even at the small track event where you and I met, not an imposing track whatsoever. It had been a year since I had raced it. We had made a couple of tweaks to it, and just remembering everything since the last time. And, you can know everything, but like you said, you need to be in your subconscious. It needs to be like muscle memory more than
Mhm.
brain knowledge, for better
Yeah.
lack of explanation, and learn by doing, basically, correct?
Yeah, I think you need to, well, doing it in the right way,
Right,
I think is
right.
important, because so many people will be like, "Oh, if I just practice and if I just do it, like, then it's fine." But it's about practicing the right skills and the way of doing things the correct way, so that way you know, because too many times you see in the motorsports industry, like especially with drivers, they will practice and practice and practice, like they'll just run laps and laps and laps, but they don't really realize like what feels right and what feels wrong.
Hmm.
And so learning and discerning that difference is really important when you go to a track, that, like you said, that you hadn't been in a year, so
Right.
that way you know how to get back up to speed quickly.
Right. And it, again, doesn't help that I believe that Charger was one of the first vehicles that I took out there. I should have, started, stair stepping my way up. There were some more.
That's okay, it made everything else easier after that.
Right, right. But absolutely. And I've said it. I said it last year. I said it again this year. Riding out there with you and Moses is a huge benefit, just because of the knowledge that the two of you are able to impart on, okay, you need to hit this apex, or this is how you hit that apex, or this is the line you should take coming into that, or watch out for this or that and the other. And I talked to some of my journalist friends that was their first time out there, and I was like, take one of the Dodges out. They send a very intelligent, capable instructor with you that will make everything else you drive today that much easier to drive and more understandable. Plus, you're starting out with some of the highest horsepower out here at the track. So
Yes, yes. It's definitely like in motorsports, sometimes people will train in something faster than what they're actually going to race, because once you go back and race something that's slower,
right,
it's not as intimidating, or it's a lot easier for your brain to process it.
right. And then there's that whole thing, I've posted some videos, including in the Charger from that event online, and without fail, and this is true for off-roading videos that I post as well, everyone in the comment section thinks that they're whatever, can go faster, better, strong, whatever the case may be. But it's one of those things where you want, doing it correctly does not always come across as looking fast, looking impressive, right?
Yes, most people forget that drifting looks very cool, but it is a slow way. It is much slower than trying to drive fast.
Right, right. And, I'm a big Top Gear Grand Tour fan, and one of their big segments on Top Gear was a star in a reasonably priced car. And one thing they always reminded, very, I don't want to say egotistical, but self-conscious drivers are like, if it looks slow, more than likely you're going to have a good time, right?
Uh, I like, you mean like when you're driving it, if it looks slow, you're
Right.
more comfortable when you're driving it,
Just
or
less drama, I guess, would be the case, right? Again, drifting looks really cool, but does not translate into your best lap times.
yes, yeah, I think it's a fine edge, right? Like you still need to carry momentum, and you're really on that. You're always trying to find that limit of adhesion
Mm-hmm.
of the tires.
Mm-hmm.
So it shouldn't look like you're out for a Sunday drive,
Right,
but it still should, look collected, and you shouldn't be sideways.
right, right. Speaking of adhesion and tires, again, some of the first times I went out there, we were under a 1 lap limit, which I was grateful when the decision was made. Okay, you get a quote unquote exploratory lap, and then you can, hammer down just a little bit more and allow those tires to warm up because my goodness, I took some out on the 1 lap limit and the next day had to go out and try them in a 2 lap situation. And the difference was dramatic. What would you say is the most important? So I've spoken to race car or rally participants, brakes, tires, or engine performance. Where are you sinking your money first?
Oh, you mean like if you want to upgrade your car?
Right.
I think it depends on like what the base model is.
Right.
So if like for my car, I would 100% upgrade the brakes. Like it's so bad. No offense to Toyota, but the RAV4 brakes are horrible.
Yeah.
It just depends like what the purpose is. Like what are you looking to get out of your car? Like is it a street driving car? Is it a track car? And then is it like it depends. So like I don't know if you have like a Honda Civic, let's say. Like I would say I would probably upgrade the tires and brakes first, and then I would do the engine.
Yeah, so many people, and myself included in this, we get so hung up in the numbers game and comparing and all that good stuff when sometimes we forget the tires are your only contact point between you and the road. And brakes are as important as going fast because it allows you to go faster longer and not have to, in your poor RAV4's case, get on the brakes sooner than you would need to in something else, right?
No, I think, people definitely forget. They're like, oh, I just need all the horsepower. And that's great. But you also, like, if you're driving it on the street or you're driving it on the track, like, you need to slow down. And I think a really good point of it is, anybody, you can drop any person into a car after the point of where the braking and the initial throttle acceleration is done, because anybody can smash the gas and unwind their hands, right? The braking is one of the most critical points that sets apart really good drivers from the great ones. Because that is so, there's so much more technique than people realize that go into the braking part of things that will affect like your overall speed and lap time. So don't knock the brakes. You got to slow down just as much as you got to speed up.
Yeah. And not to throw any particular company under the bus, but there is a certain very prominent electric vehicle that has recently made headlines for its crazy acceleration numbers. And they are also making headlines for people not exactly knowing how to control them at speed, not basically cooking the brakes, because it was not a well thought out experience between who is buying, how they are driving, and what they have, quote unquote, under the hood, right?
Yeah, it all depends on, like, I guess what your objective is for your car. But don't forget the basics. I know horsepower is cool and sexy, but sometimes you'll gain more from a different investment.
So one last question. Being a female in motorsport, what has that been like for you as an experience? I know you even alluded to it, back in the 60s, it's male-dominated sport, but we are seeing progression and diversity in motorsport. What has your experience been like?
It's so funny because, I get this question a lot and people are like, what is it like? But the thing is, I don't know any different. Like, this is all I've ever known. I've only ever grown up as a girl in motorsports or engineering. So for me, it's normal. But I I can't say like how different it would be from someone else's perspective, maybe coming into the sport at a later age. But I would definitely say that, it can be lonely sometimes because, you're not part of the boys club. You're not, you're not besties hanging out on the weekend with your guy friends, palling it up in the pits afterwards. And that's fine. Like, that's not, you're there to race, you're there to compete. But it is nice when you find other females that are interested and share that same passion. And it can be extremely tough to gain respect from certain individuals because of your gender, and you can definitely get mansplained too. Like that, I don't think that'll ever stop. Like, I'm pretty sure that's just unavoidable. But it's just that's life though. Like, there's always going to be someone that has a bias, no matter what industry that you're in, and it's just about like dealing with people and knowing like what you're good at, what you need to focus on, focusing on yourself and your goals. And people are going to react to you however they're dealing with whatever they're dealing with that day. And as long as you're trying to be a good person and working on yourself, I think that's all that you can really ask for. But yeah, I would say it's normal, and it's just like dealing with challenges that everybody else has to deal with in life.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that and your outlook on it. And I would say that this episode, our conversation, my experience, just how I met you, is proof that anyone who thinks less of you or does not give you the respect you deserve from your experience, from your immense knowledge, they need to check themselves. We'll just leave it that way. It's like,
just get a sticker that says "check yourself."
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much. I've got a segment I want to close out on called Random Misfire. I've got a list of multiple questions. I'm going to do my best to find the 8 quote unquote best ones for you, but they're this or that. Just some fun questions to end the conversation on, just from things I've picked up along conversing with you today.
Okay.
And we'll just end on a high note. So the first one I asked to everybody, I can't not ask it. Do you name your vehicles?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
100%.
Any notable names? What, like the RAV4?
The RAV4's name is Rava. I know it's not super creative, but I'm gonna expose how much of a nerd I am right now. If you've ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, Rava is like one of the spirits in the second version of Avatar and Korra. And then, but my first car's name was actually Pudge.
Oh.
Like the fish that ate peanut butter sandwiches out of Lilo and Stitch.
Okay, I was going to say like the catcher from the Texas Rangers, but okay, we'll let that one. So when it comes to unoriginal names, my Camaro was Cameron, spelled Camaron. So
just because he was a Camaro, or was there another story behind the Cameron thing?
Well, I always wanted, I fell in love with cars because of the Camaro, and at age 9 I was like, I'm gonna have one, and my 9-year-old brain named it before I owned it. So
oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, so I blame my 9-year-old self on that one. I couldn't not do it by that point. Ooh, this will be a good one. Internal combustion or EV?
Oh, internal combustion.
Basically, I asked that to ask, have you had experience with EVs?
I mean, I definitely think that there is an issue that we need to address, and we can't just keep living like, the world is never gonna, like, we can just live so wastefully and not take any responsibility for it. So I definitely think EVs have their place, but as far as like something that I would enjoy driving or want to be racing, it's definitely internal combustion.
Yes. Yeah, there's no replacement for displacement. There's no.
I like that.
Yeah, there's no getting rid of the sound. And again, the vehicles.
I know they're like trying to plan coming up with like all these sounds of their own car companies, and everyone's going to have the sound of Dodge, the sound of Ford, but I don't know. I think it's going to be so weird without the engine sounds.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think the Mercedes EQS, I got to drive one, and I liken that to the Starship Enterprise. They've got a couple of sounds that you can select
Oh my
as
gosh.
you're driving it, and it is very strange, and it makes you want to do the EV thing of, hammer down and go.
Yeah.
Doesn't help that my 4-year-old's in the back seat. Go fast, Daddy, go fast. So I've got a little Ricky
Starting them
Bobby in the
young.
making. Yeah, a little Ricky Bobby in the making. If you're not first, you're last, right? Oh, let's see here. So this will be a good one. On road or off?
Oh, I've never done an off-road race,
Okay.
but I would love to. So I feel like by default, I have to say on road, but with a disclaimer of like, if anybody out there wants me to race an off-road race, I'll be there.
So, yes, I have had a lot of guests, Rebel Rally, Dakar, that have all like been doing things in the off-road realm. So you are my first like track racer to have. So it was interesting to ask that question from a different perspective and to see. And I would love to see you put the hammer down maybe in the desert or something fun like that. That would be
Oh yeah.
interesting to follow.
My end all goal would be or I guess a bucket list item would be to do the Baja 1000 with my dad.
Yes.
Because I think he would be great at it. Just like a motorcycle, but truck form.
Right.
And it would be a fun experience. We'd either be hating or loving each other more at the end of it. But
bonding experience or something completely on the other end of the spectrum.
yeah.
Would you rather buy something from, it's hard to say to someone who races professionally, but buy something spec'd out like from the factory, or would you want to build something that is just the way you want it?
Probably build something.
Yeah. How many cylinders?
I would probably say 8.
Good answer.
Minimum of 6. Minimum.
Okay. I had to be careful with, because when you're building, like you could either, start from a, platform of, like you said, the Miata you had, you start there and build up, or there are kits out there where you can just build a complete vehicle however you want it. So, cylinder question. That's where I had to go on that one. Let's see here. Favorite vehicle, like something that you would aspire to own or haven't driven, would love to drive?
I would love to own a Koenigsegg 1-to-1,
Mm-hmm.
and I would love to drive, maybe own, but it's extremely expensive, a McLaren Sabré because of obvious reasons.
All right. Let's see here. Okay. Sometimes people like to divide work and or professional and personal lives, but do you change your own oil?
In the Miata, yes. In my own personal car, not really. I'll just go through those drive-through Valvoline oil ones because, well, especially since I moved to Indianapolis, I don't have access to a shop that I can like just do it on my own.
Right.
Because I live in an apartment, so there is no garage. But yeah, no, in like race cars, Miata, shifter carts, yes. My standard road car, nope. I just go to Valvoline.
Hand wash or drive-through car wash?
I think it depends on the car. Like if it's a nice classic car, definitely hand wash. But if it's, I'll just take my RAV4 through the automated car wash.
Yep. I added that one to the list. I'm working on trying to not steal an episode from someone else and tell the story of how hand washing saved my life. Since that point in time, though, life has changed. I have a 4-year-old. Your time availability goes out the window at that point. But I am team hand wash, even though it's been like, gosh, 2007. It's been a minute. So let's see. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got one more. Let's go a favorite car movie.
That's a tough question. I appreciate I appreciate the new movies that they come out with, like with Rush and is it 1966 Law? And then but yeah. As a kid, I loved Cars. I couldn't tell you how many times I watched that movie. Like, does that one count?
That absolutely counts. Surprisingly, you're the only the second person to say that one. So
It's such a good one. Like it makes kids really interested in cars. So I like
I can
that one.
speak
But
from experience. Yes, it
I
does.
would probably say Rush because I think that the actors did a really good job at capturing the personalities of the drivers.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you've got a moment, I've got a couple more questions that dive a little bit deeper, but we actually put those behind the paywall for our Patreon subscribers who financially support the channel, and we'll ask you those then. But what would you say, parting words to somebody wanting to get into motorsport?
Get into motorsports as a driver, as a mechanic, engineer,
All the above, like
all the things. I guess it's a little bit different depending on which role you want to fill. But in general, I would say go to the racetrack.
Yeah.
It sounds simple and like obvious, but so many people are like, "Oh, I don't know how to get into motorsports." But they don't go to the racetrack and they don't like try to meet teams. They don't try to network. They don't try to like introduce themselves to the motorsports industry. So just being present, going to the track, learning all you can from just being there and volunteering, like you can volunteer as a mechanic, as an engineer, and learn a lot from some amateur teams just to get that experience and like understand what the whole picture is about. And then from there you can decide what role you would probably want to be in. But yeah, I would definitely say just get out there and experience it for yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on this week, for chatting with us, sharing your experience, your history. I know you said it is in the works of being updated, but sabracookracing.com is one place to find you. Where else could people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Sabré Cook, at Twitter at Sabré_Cook, Sabré Cook on LinkedIn, and Sabré Cook Racing on Facebook.
And for those in the know, I will link all of those down in the description, the show notes down below. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. I am just, I am so thankful for this podcast and the people I get to meet and the conversations I get to have and the stories I get to share with you, our listening audience, because it takes all kinds to make the industry what it is and to keep it going. And Sabré has got her hands in just a little bit of everything from driving the vehicles to engineering and working on the vehicles. Just so much. It was a blast to get to talk with her and get to know more about her, other than the time we had, very short time we had, piloting the Dodge Charger around a very small, very short track at Texas Motor Speedway. Huge thanks to Dodge, for one, bringing her out to that event, allowing her to share her expertise piloting their vehicle around a track. We thank Sabré so much for coming on and joining us and sharing everything she knows with me and now with you, our listeners. As we said, you can check her out, sabrcook.com. I will put links to all her socials down in the description and show notes below. Until next time, gearheads, bye.